war machine for it.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Here's Johnny.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
Hi there, my little droogies.
Film Church.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Listen, Bill, nobody killed anybody. Someone died. It happens all the time. Life goes on. It always does, until it doesn't. But you know that, don't you?
Hello, and welcome to Film Church Radio, the podcast that treats cinema as a religion. It's Sunday. I'm Lewis.
And I'm Brandon.
And we are here to talk about movies. Each week, Brandon and I alternate picking a film for us both to watch and discuss. But this week, we conclude our 2023 director retrospective on Stanley Kubrick. For the past 14 or 13 weeks, we have been watching chronologically the films of Kubrick and discussing them in detail and then ranking them and just ticking them all off of our list. This week, we are discussing his final film and the only film he made in my lifetime, Eyes Wide Shut, from 1999, starring Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. And as promised on our Barry Lyndon episode, we do have a special guest returning. Zach is back. Welcome back, Zach.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Can't wait to discuss this with you in depth. I know that until recently, this had been a film that you had not seen. So
That's
a
right.
pair of fresh eyes, hopefully not closed, to discuss about this film.
No. Now I've since we last spoke, I've seen it 3 times.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Wow. Awesome. We're all level pegging now. Before we jump into the main meat of the film, we'd like to say thank you to everyone who has been listening to the podcast and sending their love for the show. If you're new to the show and enjoying it, be sure to subscribe and then hit that bell to be notified when there's a new episode available. We post it on Sundays because we are a film church, and we'd love for everyone to get involved with what we're doing and really, come to the church of film that we're trying to build. You can find us on all social media platforms at Film Church Radio, where you can leave us a comment or send a message about the show. We do post some extra content on our YouTube and other areas, so be sure to check it out. Also go and follow us on TikTok. That's right, we're on TikTok. How crazy is that? And we'd also love for you to rate and review the show on whatever podcast service you are streaming from. Normally what we do now is we'd go to our trailer section. This is where we talk about films other than the main film that we've been watching. But as this is kind of like a celebration of the past few weeks, a celebration of Kubrick and kind of all the films he's been making, what I thought we could do is discuss our favorite moments in a Kubrick film. There are a lot, but I think this would be a really good time to talk about the top tier moments. So Zach, as you are our guest, would you like to get us started with either one or some of your favorite Kubrick moments?
Sure. TikTok. You be careful. My favorite Kubrick moment. When you posed that question originally, I immediately thought of the very end of Dr. Strangelove, when Dr. Strangelove stands up and says, "Mein Führer, I can walk," and cut to a montage of nuclear blasts while We'll Meet Again plays.
Yeah.
And that got me kind of thinking too about how much I kind of love the very ending, the very ends of a lot of Kubrick movies. The last shot, and well, not just the last shot, but the last line of dialogue and the cut to credits at the end of A Clockwork Orange. I Was Cured All Right is such a great moment that just, he has a great way of ending a film on something that really just kind of knocks you out. This movie, too, that we're discussing today, has a very similar, an ending that kind of does the same thing. So that's kind of what I just kind of kept coming back to. But definitely Mein Führer, I Can Walk. That is probably my favorite moment in a Kubrick film of all time.
It is amazing.
It's probably the funniest. I mean, there's a lot of funny lines in Strangelove, but it is probably the funniest, I would say, in the film, for me anyway.
Yeah.
And it just leaves it leaves me with a big smile on my face.
Well, because you don't know where it's going. You don't know exactly how this film is going to end. Because like the dialogue that they're having, like that, it could keep going. Like it
Right.
really could. Like it.
Yeah.
And this last time we watched it, I was like, oh, like this could be a show. Like
Yeah.
you could have a show with these characters, like post, nuclear war, trying to rebuild the world. Um, and just like listen to them like talk for hours and being buffoons for hours. But it's like, yeah, how do you like cut that scene off and just end it? And it's like perfect. It's
Yeah,
just so like out of left field. Like what?
it's the line, it's the performance, it's the cut to the nuclear blasts, it's the music. I have a particular obsession with kind of the very ends of movies and how well that like the final cut, how when the last scene ends, and if the music is timed up and things like that. Like I love when the last shot cuts to black in tune with like the beat of a drum of the end credit song or whatever. So those are kind of things that, I mean, Kubrick doesn't cut to black in really any of these. I guess maybe this last one does, but the timing of the whole thing is what makes it. And so it's all
Yeah.
of those elements. It's Kubrick and his editor and his choice of music and Peter Sellers doing all of the work to make that final moment so great. And that's also one of those things that probably was not necessary, might not have been how the film was ended, or in the original shooting version of the script, so much as how they figured out, like, well, this is a good way to end it in the editing room. Who knows?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure someone does know. But.
Yeah.
What about you, Brandon? Some favorite moments?
Yeah. I mean, I could not pick one. I've got several. So do we want to
Yeah.
like rotate
Yeah, we can
around the
definitely do that.
table?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it.
I'm gonna go in chronological order because that's how I wrote them down. But I didn't do all the movies. I have 7 moments.
Okay.
But in Killer's Kiss, the shots of Vinny, the main character, in the beginning when he's like in his apartment, and he's just there's nothing really going on, but just the way that Kubrick shot that is it's just I don't know. It's like candy. I can just like eat up the scene. Like
Mm.
there's like a shot of him looking through like the fish bowl when he's like feeding the fish, and
Yeah.
just I don't know. There's something about that scene that just when I was like trying to go through the moments, I was like thinking of each film off the top of my head, and I was like, those shots were cool,
Yeah.
like those moments.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and do one more since I have a lot.
Yeah.
And then in Doctor Strangelove, the scenes with Peter Sellers where he's playing the president and he's calling I guess it's the president of Russia. Is that the correct term?
Premier
The
of
premier.
the Union.
Yes, the premier of the Soviet Union. Yeah, that guy. Just that scene just gets me every time when he's like, just the pacing of it and the progression of the phone call where he's like, "Oh, I got this. Like, I'm gonna show you guys why I'm the president." And then he's just like, listen, you know the bomb?"
Well, how do you think I feel?
Yeah.
Tree.
What about you, man?
I mean, yeah, just again, there's a few. I really like. Fear and Desire. We both did not enjoy a whole amount. I really enjoyed the first attack in Fear and Desire with the food and just the way that attack was told.
Yeah.
Through the food falling on the floor and hands grabbing, like it was very visceral, and I really enjoyed that. I think about that a lot. One of my all-time favorite moments, full stop, is them going over the top in Paths of Glory, and just the tracking shot through the trenches and how realistic it is with the craters of where the shells have fallen and soldiers just falling around. Kirk Douglas, it's like imprinted in my brain. I think
Yeah.
that's such an incredible shot. I know that Paths of Glory we both really enjoyed, but that shot especially is up there with some of my favourite.
Yeah, I didn't write any down for Passive Glory just because I couldn't pick out any one scene, I guess, in the film. The film as a whole is very impactful. I mean, I guess I do really enjoy when he finally like sort of starts insulting his superiors, and they're just like, "Oh, how dare you!"
Yeah, who's the guy who plays like the head baddie? Menju something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
What's his first name? That actor just has
Adolphe Menjou.
Adolphe Menjou. He's got such a distinctive voice that just makes him sound like such a prick.
yeah,
It's one of those things too that about that film. It's been a while since I've seen it, but there's always sometimes with like historical films or films set in other countries. There's discussions about how they present the dialogue, whether the actors are doing accents, even though they're supposed to be speaking in a language other than English or whatever. And I think that that's a movie that's a testament to it's perfectly fine for an American film set in France to have actors speaking English. They're supposed to be speaking French, but we're not going to have them do French accents. We're just going to do American accents. That's fine. It's a testament to that because Douglas and Menjou have these really great voices that lend themselves to the characters that they are playing. You just kind of forget that you're supposed to be in France because it's this guy standing up for what's right versus the prick who's in charge.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what gets me just about his character is when Douglas finally does say, I forget what it is. I have to go back and watch the movie and listen to the podcast because I think I mentioned it in the podcast too. I forget what it is, but he says something that's not even that insulting, but Minju immediately like starts acting like a child.
Yeah.
I knew you were after my job.
Yeah, he's like throwing a tantrum.
Yeah.
But what about you, Zach? Any other Kubrick moments?
Okay, I didn't write any down, so I'm shooting from the hip. But I was thinking that I love, and this isn't necessarily a moment. Well, I guess it's a moment, and once again, it's been a long time since I've seen Lolita. I didn't rewatch it when I listened to you guys' episode about it. Shelley, not Duvall,
Winters.
Shelley Winters, in that film, I love her performance. And there's a part where, or maybe there's a few parts where she's trying very hard to be like more quote unquote upper class than she is, and she keeps saying like, "Don't you find?" like to like the end of her sentences.
Yeah.
And she's just doing these affectations that she thinks make her sound more smart and sophisticated, that really just kind of make her look more oafish to the people that she's around. And I just really love that. That's probably one of those details about that movie that sticks out. That obviously it's been years since I've seen it, but that always stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean the acting in that movie alone just makes me want to. Every time I look at where we put it on the ranking, I'm like, we should move that up.
Yeah, Shelley Winters is like one of those actresses that whenever she shows up in a film, I'm very, very pleased to see her.
Yeah.
If you've not seen Night of the Hunter, listeners and Brandon and Zach, she is phenomenal in that. Plays a really great part. Night of the Hunter is one of the best films.
I have not seen it.
It's so good. Maybe I'm gonna have to suggest it at some point because it's phenomenal.
The next moment for me is from 2001: Space Odyssey when the apes see the monolith for the first time.
Yeah.
Just that moment is so. There's not a ton going on in the film, but just the progression of the storytelling leading to that moment, and it's probably like 20 minutes into the film.
Mm-hmm.
The music, and it's just like, it's just a monolith. Like it's just this stone this black stone door
Yeah.
just sitting in the middle of nowhere with these prehistoric apes, and the music and everything is just, it's haunting and engaging, and just, I think that's the moment of the film where it starts to connect on some kind of, I don't know, deep subconscious level where you're just like, I'm in. What's
Yeah.
next?
Yeah, it's gripping. I mean, there's so many from 2001
Yeah.
that kind of stick out. I think that whole film in general. In terms of like storytelling, I absolutely like the scene that still has me like, my pulse is my pulse rate goes up when I watch it, is where Dave and the other astronaut go in the pod to talk about Hal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they kind of like, Hal, can you hear us? And then they discuss it. And it kind of, and that whole shot where you can see Hal through the window, and then it cuts, and it's Hal's point of view watching the lips move. And it is one of the like most burnt, like spine chilling, things in the whole of Kubrick's career. It's just that he's heard everything you've said. This is not going to go well, and it's just done so well.
Yeah.
It's just it's a masterclass in tension and direction, and then like pulling the carpet out from underneath the viewer. It's brilliant. I love that scene.
Yeah, the whole opening sequence with the apes is such a like ballsy. Yeah, I trust the audience moment.
Yeah.
But obviously the ending of that sequence is another ballsy I trust the audience moment, and that's the cut that everybody knows and loves, the cut from the bone to
Yeah.
the spaceship, which is a great moment. But taking that whole sequence, just that the whole opening of the film, from the title sequence to the Dawn of Man sequence, that it's just I wish more filmmakers could open up films in ways like that.
Yeah.
And I should, I guess, clarifying, I wish more studio films
Yeah. Yeah.
with
And I think
budgets
that's something.
opened up in ways that just trust the audience to follow the pictures.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there about something that we've discovered about Kubrick is how much faith he put in audiences, and how much he didn't try and belittle or kind of talk down to
Yeah.
anyone. He did massive amount of research for every film he did, and he still didn't try and like spoon feed it us. There's a lot of work in there that needs to be done, which I think is why a lot of people come back to Kubrick again and again, is because it's such a rewarding experience to watch a film that he's made, and kind of there's so many layers to every single one of them. There's so much more that you can like read about it and research and find out, well, this meant that, Barry Lyndon, for example, like the paintings that he was basing the shots on, it's like, okay, that adds this extra layer that a casual viewer would not necessarily get, it's been the best.
Yeah.
Any more, Brandon? Any more special moments?
Yeah, the boxing match in Barry Lyndon, I fucking love.
Yeah.
Like, that was the moment of Barry Lyndon where I like sat up in my seat and was like, "Oh shit, here we go." And then I did not expect Barry Lyndon or Barry to be such a badass. So like from that moment on, I was like, all right, I'm seeing what this guy is doing next. What is that guy's name? Pat Roach, I think. I can't find it, but I'm pretty sure that's his name.
Oh, the other boxer.
Yeah, the boxer, and then he's also in, Spielberg uses him in all of the Indiana Jones movies. Yeah, I love that moment.
Yeah. I love the final duel in Barry Lyndon.
Me too.
Yeah.
Just the tension that kind of, again, all these moments that I'm picking are kind of like the very high intensity moments. But yeah, just the misfire of the first shot and how darkly humorous that is. Just like, oh no, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Are
you? Yeah, exactly.
We didn't talk about how the boxing match is something that Kubrick has done before or filmed before.
Yeah.
You know, with Day of the Fight, and then in Killer's Kiss, and then he has this great boxing match in Barry Lyndon.
Yeah.
And it's also, was the boxing match like handheld camera?
I think
I
so.
think so.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
way that it was filmed.
close. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then later on in the film, when he and Bullingdon have like a brawl uh, in front of like an audience,
Yeah.
that's handheld camera too, and that
Mhm.
really breaks up that it's such a departure from everything else, where the whole film is so specifically composed, and then you
Yeah.
get these rough handheld shots where Kubrick was, I'm pretty sure, operating the camera himself too.
More than likely.
Yeah.
So, like you, I recently rewatched, or I started rewatching, I didn't finish it, rewatching Room 237, which I had seen a long time ago. But there's a guy, one of the people at the beginning of that movie says something that totally rung true to me, which is the opening shot of The Shining, that helicopter shot, and how he was like gripping the arms of his seat because he felt like he felt like he was gonna like fall over and fall into like the lake, like that.
Yeah.
That shot is such a like on the edge as it's flying over the lake and into the mountain, that he really was just like, oh, it feels like I'm gonna fall over and fall down into the film. And I have a similar reaction to that opening shot. It's almost nauseating, not in a bad way, not in a like I don't want to watch this movie kind of way, but it really, combined with that music, it kind of makes me feel like you're gonna fall into something. And
Yeah. Yeah. It sets up, the whole film,
Yeah.
I was going to cheat and say the whole of The Shining, but I realized that it's moment and not, film. The way that Jack Nicholson says "Light of My Life" is one of my favorite film readings ever, where he's following Wendy up the stairs. Just the amount of animosity he's got towards her at that point. He's just like ready to rip her to shreds. And his performance, shows it.
that reminds me that what I wasn't also going to say was, there's a line delivery in A Clockwork Orange from Mr. Alexander, the author, after he realizes that who Alex is. He's taking Alex in, and he realizes who he is, and Alex is eating dinner while he's just sitting there watching. And the way he says, like, "How's the food? Try the wine." So like great. That that's a film with a lot of great line deliveries.
Mhm.
The cop who's taking all of his stuff when he's checking into prison. Are you now, or have you ever been a homosexual? The line delivery of everything he says is great.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes back to, it's almost like every Kubrick film has some moment where there's this line delivery that just stands out as the best.
Yeah.
Well, the light of my life line, doesn't it come from Lolita?
I don't know if that, that is an expression, light of my life.
Yeah.
It's just a general expression. But yes,
Mm.
light of my life, fire of my loins, Lolita. That's the opening line of the main text of Lolita.
Mm.
Okay. Is it used in the film that Kubrick makes?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay.
It's often considered the opening line, but I don't know, that I have a weird relationship with this because that book has a foreword, which is actually part of the narrative. It's part of the fiction. And people, I think a lot of times people skip it because they're like, oh, I'm not going to read the foreword. But the foreword is actually the framing device for the novel.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you technically would count the opening line of that being
The first line. Yeah.
first line of the novel, but Light of My Life, Lolita, Light of My Life, Fire of My Loins is the opening narration from Humbert in the book.
Yeah.
Interesting.
How deliberate that is on Kubrick's part in trying to reference Lolita, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could have just been Jack Nicholson
That's true.
reading it that day.
Jack Nicholson referencing Lolita.
Yeah. I love the shot in The Shining with where Jack Nicholson is just staring out the window.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good. I like it.
Yeah. You're like,
Um,
cool, he's crazy.
yeah. In Full Metal Jacket, just Vincent D'Onofrio all the time.
Mhm.
Love all of it.
Yeah,
He's amazing. He's incredible.
yeah.
I think I can't remember which came first, like recognizing that that was Vincent D'Onofrio in Full Metal Jacket or recognizing Vincent D'Onofrio outside of Full Metal Jacket. I don't remember, you know,
Mm.
which
For me,
came
it's
first.
definitely outside. It's always a bit of a surprise when I'm like, oh, it's Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah,
Still,
yeah. Because I think I had seen Full Metal Jacket and then seen Vincent D'Onofrio and other things, and then
yeah,
realized at some point that it was the same person. It's like,
yeah,
oh shit. Um, he's incredible. And then in this movie, in Eyes Wide Shut, which we're about to discuss, I
Mhm.
love like watching it the second time. I realized how brilliant the shot is, where uh, Nick is trying to write down the password, and then you just see Tom Cruise's hand come in and hold the
Yeah.
napkin
yeah,
steady. It's
yeah.
fucking amazing. It's such a good shot.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, from Eyes Wide Shut, just I really like when he goes back to the house. We're going to talk about it, but we just like
Yeah.
it just holds on that shot of the car coming down very slowly,
Mm,
and then the note being passed through the gate. I really like that.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm going to save some of my favorite moments for a bit later, though.
Cool. Well, that's it for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's it for me as well. I mean, again, there's probably a lot more in there that we haven't mentioned. And this will change on the next viewing of each of these films, I'm sure. But for now, we're going to leave the past Kubrick films in the past and move forward to our feature presentation. Eyes Wide Shut from 1999. The letterbox summary: Cruise, Kidman, Kubrick. After Dr. Bill, Harford's wife Alice, admits to having sexual fantasies about a man she met, Bill becomes obsessed with having a sexual encounter. He discovers an underground sexual group and attends one of their meetings, and quickly discovers that he is in over his head. So here we go. The last Kubrick film. The longest time between movies as well in all of Kubrick's career. And Kubrick passed away just days, weeks after handing in a cut to the Warner Brothers executives. So there is still a question of whether this is the film that Kubrick wanted us to see. But this is what we have. So, Brandon, me and you have both seen it before. Zach, I know you said that you've watched it 3 times recently.
Yep.
What was it about it that kind of held you back from watching it up until now?
I think I may have told Brandon this, but probably just a reluctance to run out of Kubrick films, uh,
Hmm.
because I've seen all of them. Um, I can't remember if I've seen those very early shorts, but I'm I'm not clamoring to watch Day of the Fight.
You'll
Um,
still have Seafarers on there.
yeah, but at least as far as his narrative feature films go, it was kind of like, well, that's the only one I have left, and so there was this sort of putting off, like, well, every day I still have a new Kubrick film that I could be
Yeah,
watching, and now there are
yeah,
no new Kubrick films, unless you consider every rewatch of a Kubrick film like seeing the movie for the first time all over again.
yeah.
For a lot of them, you may as well be. Um, but I think that was just kind of it. And then when I finally watched it, I was like, I should have watched this much sooner.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking of watching it much sooner, Brandon, when did you first see it?
I have no idea. I don't know. A long time ago. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I did a kind of a Kubrick dive maybe like 10 years ago and watched Clockwork Orange and 2001 Space Odyssey and The Shining, and I guess I mean pretty much all the big hitters except for, Barry Lyndon. Um I probably watched them all around the same time, including Eyes Wide Shut. So it's been a while. It's been probably 10 or more years since I had watched it, and I couldn't remember. I mean, there are certain things about the movie that stay with you for sure, but past the going to the house scene, the big orgy scene, I couldn't remember anything. I was like, I have no idea how this ends. I've got no memory of anything after that. Um, and it was in my mind, the movie is what was a lot more horror-esque, more haunting, more, I don't know, more startling, more stunning in some ways. The movie is still, I love the movie. The movie's amazing. But I just mean my memory of the movie was a lot more haunting, I think, than this experience. But like I've said, after I said this on, I think, the Shining episode, after going through all of these Kubrick films, well, before I went through them, I would have said Kubrick was a horror filmmaker. Now I'm like, I think he's a comedy filmmaker because I can just, I, with everything of his that I'm watching now, I sense him just standing behind the camera, just giggling like a schoolboy.
Hmm.
And to me, like I don't think that's actually the case. It's fun to think about that possibility. I don't actually think that, these are comedies.
I
But
could be
if
I could be misremembering this, but I think Malcolm McDowell said in a commentary for A Clockwork Orange that there were moments where Kubrick was like shoving his fist in his own mouth to
so
stifle his laughter
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
in takes. So
So some of it is true.
yeah.
But with this film, if this is a comedy, if Eyes Wide Shut is a comedy, it's one big joke about about Stanley Kubrick having blue balls. Like the whole movie is just a giant metaphor for blue balls. The whole movie looks blue. Tom Cruise is trying to have sex through the whole thing but never does. Except for, I guess, in the beginning he has sex with his wife after the party. But yeah, that's my take.
Well, the interesting thing about the idea of it being a comedy too is that uh, I read that the earliest iteration of Kubrick's idea for the film was when he first wanted to make it in the late 60s, early 70s. He wanted to make it as just a flat out sex comedy.
Yeah.
And his idea was having Steve Martin or Woody Allen in the
Right,
lead.
that's right. Yeah, and then his wife was like, "Don't make this movie right now. You're not old enough to make that. You need to make this later in life when when you're sure that our marriage is a sure thing."
Well, I think she was also putting him off uh, from hoping that he just would forget about it and never make it. Uh, there's some the disc for this film has this like BBC television broadcast. It's like 45-minute long documentary that seems like it was kind of made maybe the year between this and AI because it feels like a sort of like commemorating Kubrick, but Steven Spielberg is in it a lot, and his collaborators for AI are in it a lot. So it seems like it was kind of maybe also leading into promoting that. But his wife is in there, and she like hated this book. I don't think she ever wanted him to make this film.
Yeah.
So she may have been hoping he'll forget about it and never make it, but eventually he did get around to it. And we're lucky for it because although I kind of want to see the Woody Allen version of this.
Yeah.
How about you, Lewis? When did you first see this movie, and how do you feel about it now?
I think I must have seen it when I first started film school. I think that's probably when I kind of put it in. It was like the Kubrick film that I knew the least about without having seen it. I didn't understand it
Yeah.
because obviously I was young, hadn't really been in a relationship for a while, and was anticipating a bit more of like a sexual thriller.
Yeah.
And instead, it's a very kind of meditative take on marriage and who we are as people.
Yeah.
Watched it again. I think 2016. I think was when I last logged it on Letterboxd. So it's been a while. And again, I felt pretty cold to it. I was still a bit like, I'm not, it's not grabbing me in the same ways as the other films. It's not as immediate. But this time, something clicked. And I don't know whether it's because we have been watching them all chronologically, and I can see this overarching theme throughout all of them of the duality of man and like the masks that we put on for everyday life as opposed to who we really are inside. But I was mesmerized the whole time. I just think it's just an absolutely brilliant take on masculinity and marriage and like hurt and like self-esteem, all these things rolled up into just one odyssey through the same streets of New York.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. It really is.
For the listeners out there, it should be known that the three of us talking about this film are all in long-term committed relationships.
Yes.
And do what?
Two specifically are marriages.
Yeah. I mean, mine might as well be. We've been together for 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You know each other pretty well, I'm guessing.
Yeah. As well as Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman? Probably. Yeah. We'll see. But do you think that has something to do with it? Has something to do with you liking this movie a lot more now? Because, okay, well, here's my take on it. Relationships when you're young are like fantasy, right?
Yeah.
They're like you romanticize them and fantasize about them, the perfect relationship, the perfect couple, being partners and all of that. And not to say that it's not like that after 10 years. There are still elements of mystery that still exist, I think, in our relationship. Mystery in like a romanticized way. But relationships also take a lot of hard work. Like if you're going to be like after 10 years, you have to do actual real work to make it work, right?
Mm.
And even though it is hard work sometimes, we're all human and we all still have fantasies, and I think this movie is about I think this movie is about the dark paths that you can go on when you let your fantasies go too far, when your ultimate goal is to still be in this relationship and be committed to this person. Because Tom Cruise, his character through the whole movie, he's jealous, he's angry, he wants to, kind of get revenge on his wife because she had this fantasy, because she fantasized about cheating on him. And so he tries to go down this path of cheating on her. But us as an audience, still sees him as redeemable because he never actually does anything really. I mean, he kisses one woman kisses him. He like touches the prostitute's roommate's boobs. That's a horrible way to describe a character. The prostitute's roommate. But like, he never like consummates anything. He never actually cheats on his wife. And in the end, he comes back to her and he, just is just overwhelmed with just with the sheer overwhelming desire to hurt her in that way or to cheat on her or to get her back. Just the fact that he had that desire overwhelms him to the point that he just breaks down, and he's like, please forgive me. I'll tell you everything. At that point, he's just so desperate. And if I feel like that's not exactly something that everybody has experienced, but everybody, I think, that's been in a long relationship has experienced something like that to a degree. This is an exaggerated movie version of that, but I think it is touching on something that is that people who decide to be in a long-term committed relationship will run into at some point. Big or small, one of the or both at some point will have to like come to their partner and be like, this bizarre thing happened. I have to confess it to you. I'm sorry. Here's like, I've got to lay all this out.
Yeah, I definitely think that that the fact that nothing is consummated throughout the film is more about like his subconscious not wanting to hurt her in the same way that he's been hurt.
Yeah.
Like, I think that he keeps kind of getting to this point where it's like it's right in front of him. He can do it, and he kind of backs away at every time that it's possible, And in the end, it's kind of like, well, it's he gets his reward because the Domino, the prostitute, gets terrible test results back that could, that he very well could have caught.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, a pat on the back for like, hey, congratulations on not doing that thing that you were trying to do all night.
Yeah.
You haven't got AIDS.
Yeah. But it seems to me that like all of the times that he ends up not having sex with anyone, it's not really up to him. It's like up to fate in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think that he just needs to be a bit more like, I don't know, forceful about it. Not in like a, in a Sergio Leone way, but in like a
the gambler said there is no house password.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he,
been like,
the prostitute was right there, and he was just chatting away, and then,
That's true. Yeah, he was dragging it out.
Yeah, it's like, just do it. If you're gonna do it, do it. He also had the chance. I know he's not gay, but with the receptionist at the hotel, all these people have pretty much thrown themselves at him.
Or the underage daughter of the.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. The daughter of the guy that died as well.
Now, so I kind of, I don't know how much I like this letterbox summary. Bill becomes obsessed with having a sexual encounter. Is that really what's happening?
To me, it seems like it is. Yeah.
I mean, the first encounter is the daughter of the guy who dies. He isn't going there with the intent of. He's going there as a doctor. One, he's going there as a doctor, and two, to get out of the house because he's so frustrated and flustered by the news he's heard from his wife that she once had a fantasy.
Yeah.
That isn't, to me, that isn't him becoming obsessed with having, a sexual encounter. The prostitute, I think, is the first instance where he really thinks like, yeah, I will get back at my wife. And he doesn't. And then he goes to Nick Nightingale. If not for, getting the password, he would not go to this place. And he has no idea what he's getting into when he goes there.
Yeah.
He's just a curious motherfucker who wants to stay out all night because he wants to get away from his wife for the night. Yeah.
I mean, the way that I've read it, it's just that his idea of sex probably before this is very vanilla. He seems a very put together guy. Nothing is kind of out of the ordinary. They've got like a kid and he's a doctor and stuff. And this has just thrown his whole concept of sexual relationships out of the window. And this is, how much of this actually happens is something that keeps coming up to me, because it feels like a dream the whole way through. It's so inconsequential. All these things happen that just like link to one another, that it feels very dreamlike. And I mean, it's him dealing with his shortcomings about, in the bedroom, in terms of like just being able to excite his wife anymore.
Right.
Because it just seems that she had this fantasy and he is like, he's obsessing about it and nothing happened. And he's just like, and even his conversation with her about it is just that, men want to have sex with everything. Women don't really have any desires.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very backwards,
Yeah. I one thing too is that her confession is not just about cheating on him, but that in a fleeting moment, her desire was to throw away her entire life for one encounter with the sailor.
Yeah.
She's willing to leave her husband and daughter in a fleeting moment. That is a thought that went through her head. And I do think that, like, fear and desire is a big component of this. It's like an acknowledgement of desire. What the film is about to me, I think, is like the acknowledgement of desire and the taboo of that acknowledgement. Just the taboo of saying, like, I had a thought that I screwed someone else and I left you and our daughter for him just for that one night. To think that, to me, is just like, well, every human has intrusive thoughts or has thoughts that take them down a dark path, and it isn't even so much the problem isn't even so much that she had the thought. It's that she confessed to it and acknowledged, like, yeah, I thought I had this fleeting moment of desire. And that's kind of what the movie's all about to me.
Yeah, I mean, her point of doing that, it's like the way that she delivers the whole story and everything, you could even read it as being exaggerated. Like you said, it could have just been one fleeting intrusive thought in
Right.
reality, but she's deliberately telling him this story as a way to prove to him that women are not basic bitches. That women are not that women have desires, and that women are not just looking to men for for stability or for whether or not they're going to be good dads or that kind of stuff. That women can be just as, I don't know.
Horny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's a sound bite for you.
Horny.
Now, it's something I thought about, and I don't think that this is necessarily a healthy way of watching a movie, what I'm about to describe, which is speculating on things that happened before and after the movie. But I wondered if he was actually just like a serial philanderer who never thought, well, my wife wouldn't cheat on me.
Yeah.
I sleep with women that it doesn't matter. She wouldn't do that, though. I always wondered that, because I mean, he's a handsome guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He looks just like the guy from Jerry Maguire. He's works. He's this high end doctor.
Yeah.
He's got a staff of beautiful women. He's friends with this millionaire, Ziegler. And he is completely unfazed when he is called away from a party to assist Ziegler with an overdosing prostitute. Which kind of makes me wonder, like, oh, well, I mean, are there secrets about stuff like this that happened between him and Ziegler and him and his friends, whatever, that he just knows, like, it's just between men?
It's just business.
Yeah.
There's very little evidence in the film to back it up. It is more of just a thought that maybe even the next time I watch the movie, I'll watch it with this assumption and see how the film plays out and if it affects performances to me or how I see certain things. Because when he confesses everything to her, we don't hear him confess anything, right? It just fades out. And he says he's going to tell her everything.
Yeah.
Obviously, the obvious reason for that is he's just going to tell her what we've already just seen.
Yeah.
So we don't need to hear it. But maybe there's more to it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
I think, in terms of that Ziegler scene kind of jumping about a bit, I think that does a lot of heavy lifting for us as the audience, because it automatically, when we get to the final scene between Bill and Ziegler there, we've already in our head got that connected with like sex and overdoses with him, his character.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get to that scene, it's like, okay, so he was involved somehow in this Miss New York or whatever, kind of having an overdose. But going back to the dream and everything, it's not the dream, like, to me, that's the most damning. It's the dream where she's with the Navy officer and she's laughing at him. I mean, to me, that is like, what is your subconscious at this point where you're having dreams about like sleeping with other men and laughing in the face of your husband? To me, that would be the more worrying part, not the initial desire.
Doesn't she say something when she's like talking about him touching his patient's breasts, and she's like something about his little dicky or something?
Yeah. When your patients are having their little titties squeezed.
That's
yeah.
Yes, the movie's dreamlike, but I don't think anything in the movie is a dream other than those flashes of the black and white, like Lumiere footage of her with the sailor. I think everything that we see is happening literally, but it is deliberately dreamlike.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's Kubrick's dream.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the most personal film that he's made, in terms of just putting his current personal life out on the table. I think this is the most personal film he's made, because I think it's a literal interpretation, or it's like a dream-like film, like interpretation of a literal issue that he's having with a long-term relationship.
I mean, I just see it as him returning to his favorite theme. As I mentioned before, just that duality. We talked about in War how it can change you as a human and you have to kind of become somebody else. But even as far removed as, a marriage, do we actually really know the person that we're married to? And like, what is it that will,
right?
Are they putting a mask on for us? Are they, who are they around other people? Because I watched it with Chelsea and she said something really interesting. Like the first 20 minutes, she's like, you can tell that they're acting. Like Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are very kind of like, I don't know, it's like stagey somehow. It's very kind of, everything's enunciated. They're kind of talking very slowly to each other, and you can see them acting. And I think that's deliberate. I think that, that they're acting in front of each other. They're acting in front of the guests at the party. When Tom Cruise has got a girl on either arm and he does that awful Tom Cruise laugh, it's very forced. And I just, I think that as the film goes on, they become more honest with each other and become more real. And I think that's what we've seen from Kubrick the whole way through, is that who are we?
Yeah. Who am I?
I don't know enough about his sex life to think that this was like him just being like, oh, need to get out there.
I am sure there's a documentary about a church that you could watch that would talk about it, but also the level to just what people that you encounter in your daily life outside of your marriage. We kind of assume that he's got a pretty good friendship with Ziegler, and at the end of the film, Ziegler is telling him like there's things that you don't know about and you need to keep your nose out of. Like our friendship has its limits.
Yeah.
There I am privy to things that you cannot know about ever, and you need to stop trying, thinking about it, or things are going to get bad. And even people you just met. I mean, the what is the guy, Romanian or whatever, the guy who owns the shop,
Yeah. Yeah.
Serbian, Slavic guy, whatever, who is like screaming about calling the police on these guys for, you know, sleeping with his daughter. And the next time we see him, he is all but offering up his teenage daughter to
Yeah.
Tom Cruise. So it's kind of this like, you think you know someone.
Yeah.
It's like layers of that through everyone, from a
Yeah.
person you just met to someone that you think you're close friends with to someone that you're married with. You think you know someone, but there's always some thing that they're hiding.
Yeah.
And once they reveal it, it changes the dynamic completely.
Yeah. Well, that scene especially, and like there's a few others along the way, it just blurs the lines between what's staged and what's real. There's things that we see that we're later told, oh no, that was staged. That whole scene with the teenage daughter and the men, you're like, was that staged? Was that
Yeah.
was that there to kind of, I don't know, so that she could whisper, you'll need it, you'll need it, whatever, like gold trimmed or whatever she says to him. Yeah, you're not really sure what is for the benefit of Bill or what's real.
I took it all on face value.
Took it all. See, I see it more dreamlike. See, this is the thing.
Yeah.
Like all those little things, I'm just like becoming more and more into the fact that it wasn't. I mean, it all did happen. I feel like it all did happen, but I don't know. It's just like it's like an other world experience.
Well, I mean, I agree with you on that. That I think it's very deliberate. Film is the only real art form that can like imitate a dream,
Yeah.
because a dream is like watching a movie in your head while you sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And movies are. I mean, I like a film that taps into the dreamlike quality of film, because I think most movies don't really do that. You have David Lynch, obviously, but there's an artificiality to this film, and the dreamlike quality. All of that is deliberate, but I don't think that any of it is to suggest that these things aren't happening or that they're not real. Because one, I just think Kubrick is smarter than
Yeah.
that. He's too intellectual to be like, oh, it was all a dream. And the film distinguishes what is quote unquote real and what is a fantasy or a thought or a dream by having Tom Cruise's visions of his wife be portrayed in black and white, like silent film style film. So those are not literally happening. The film tells us that through the language, right? That those are visions he's having. But everything else, dreamlike as it is, to me is just, that is the world that this character lives in.
Yeah, maybe less dreamlike then and more the inevitability around it. Just that he is kind of careering towards this, and he can't, like, everything is just leading him there by nature. He's supposed to end up at this party. He's supposed to kind of have this confrontation with Ziegler. He's supposed to go back to his wife and want to, unload and tell her everything. It's just like he's an unwilling passenger on this steam train to the end. He's trying to avoid it at all times, and it's just taking him there.
It's like life, baby.
That's it. Yeah. I love how, as the film progresses, there's just more and more. It's like throwing it in his face. Like when he's being chased by, well, not chased, but being followed by kind of like the goon.
Yeah.
And he comes outside a cafe, which is Verona, which is, I know, we've all worked at Starbucks. Cafe Verona was the coffee of love, and we sold it Valentine's Day and paired it with chocolate and all that kind of stuff. And then on the opposite corner was like a lingerie shop. And it's just all these things that just keep being thrown in his face of like, the sexual world is bigger than you think and bigger than you, and he just can't escape it anywhere he goes.
Well, I think the film poses the question, and maybe this is what I was getting at earlier. It poses the question of like, what is more natural? What is more in human nature? Is it monogamy or polygamy? Because
Yeah.
what do we
Yeah.
come from? Like, if we come from, you know, these ancient apes, like polygamy is kind of like what we're used to. And
Yeah.
like, is monogamy like is to like commit to a relationship against our human nature, and we're constantly having to fight against that in order to keep it.
Hmm.
And I mean, yeah, I don't think the film necessarily answers that question, but I think that's fine.
Yeah, we've said it all the way through. It leaves you with questions, but that's good. You
Yeah.
you don't want to be like, oh, okay, this is what it was then.
Yeah.
There's a story that I read, and I can't remember where I read this exactly, but after a take, and I don't know what it was. It was during the filming of The Shining. They calls cut, and someone has shared an anecdote of him turning to them and saying, "Let's see what the French film critics make of that," and he winked. And today he might say, "Let's see what the podcasters make of that,"
Yeah.
because I don't think there are any answers in this, and I don't think he has maybe what he thought, what he believed, but he didn't necessarily care about putting that in the film, and I think that's the end of my point.
I would like to point out, after this whole "is this a dream" debate, that the movie is based on the novel Dream Story
Well, yes,
by Arthur
Schnitzler.
Schnitzler. Yeah.
Yes.
Um,
Schnitzler was uh, Austrian Jew, uh, living in Vienna at the same time as Freud, and he wrote all of his fiction, or a lot of his fiction was very, very much about dreams. To the point where I think Freud even made like a public comment saying like, I would never have to sit down with him. He's published something like, he's published the full his stories are his psychoanalysis. Like, I don't need to analyze his dreams.
yeah.
Traumnovelle, I think, is the like original German title. But yeah, that dream like quality comes from the book.
Yeah.
And I believe that the film follows the novel's plot very, very closely. I think the only major addition is the character of Ziegler. There's no analog for him in the book, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it is an otherwise fairly straightforward adaptation, just changing the names and transporting the setting to sometime in the 90s in New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not set around Christmas either, right? The book, I think it's set.
Probably it's like Carnival or something.
Yeah, it's like another celebration, but it's not Christmas.
Right, because the opening like party that they're at is like a carnival celebration downtown or something like that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I am so glad that this is Kubrick's final film. Not that I wish that he had made more.
Thank God it's
obviously.
over.
I'm not glad it's over. It's so interesting to me that such like a filmmaker of such high caliber and such a reputation, and everybody waiting to see what he puts out next, does something so left field as his final film. But not really when you think about it. As I said with last week's episode, if he had ended on Full Metal Jacket, people would have remembered him as a war filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, it shows you that that's not exactly who he was. He was an artist, and this film has so many art house filmmaker qualities to it, and that's what I love about him as a filmmaker, is that he was an art house filmmaker, but he was so popular. Like, he was making like big budget movies that made money at the box office, but he was making art house films. I mean, this film has like the way that it's shot, the way that it's lit, Like, a lot of people light their films like this now, today, but back then I don't think it was as common. Just like the excessive use of the blue light, and the music feels very art house to me, and I love that quality to it because it
Yeah, I think
feels like an independent filmmaker. Even though, I mean, he is the ultimate independent filmmaker because he has all the
yeah,
money and all the final say.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
still indie.
You
And the,
bring me onto one of my favorite things about Eyes Wide Shut is Larry Smith's cinematography, um, and the especially that blue lighting, as you said. The switch from when they're having that conversation, when they're smoking the reefer, and and the blue light is in the bathroom, and they're in that warm glow of the bedroom, and then as soon as she tells him of the fantasy, the next time we're in the bedroom, the warm glow is outside of the room. It's like all the warmth and togetherness of this bedroom has now left. It's just a cold, desolate place, and it's that subtle shift of us as the viewer that when we see that, it tells us where these characters are emotionally. You know, Bill is just the passion's gone. And it's the same for Nicole Kidman's character as well. Alice, I think, is it Alice?
yes.
Yeah, yeah. The passion's gone from their relationship. It's not. I mean, it's not a passionate one at all, and that's all down to the cinematography, really, from Larry Smith and how he gets that across.
Well, yeah, an independent filmmaker, and yet casting two of the biggest, certainly the biggest husband and wife stars at the time. So, uh, yeah, I think I don't know if we talked about this when we did Barry Lyndon, but like, or if you guys have probably touched on it, that Kubrick was very uh, sensitive about the box office results of his movies. Like he wanted them to do well. He did not want
Yeah,
his movies to fly. He did want people to go and pay to see his movies in droves. Um, and so, especially post Barry Lyndon, it does feel like each of those films there's a deliberate choice of what feels like guaranteeing box office success. Adapting The Shining, one of the biggest sensational books, uh, America or in the world. I don't know how, but certainly a book that put Stephen King on the map. Full Metal Jacket. I mean, maybe my theory falls apart with that. I don't know. War movies, they're popular.
I
they
think also for Full Metal Jacket, because when you started talking, I was thinking about that. I think also we're not we're not supposed to know who's going to survive. They're just kind of nameless recruits. That it's the numbers as opposed to the individual in Full Metal Jacket.
But Full Metal Jacket has that, pop soundtrack that I'm sure he's also thinking like, well, okay, that's a record that is going to get us money too, the soundtrack for that film. And then Eyes Wide Shut, you cast Tom and Nicole, that's box office success.
Yeah.
And I think that I do believe that thinking went in his process of trying to make these movies. But the fact that Tom and Nicole were married almost seems like the idea of using a married couple for those characters almost seems like one of those stipulations he probably had, like wanting to use an actual waiting for an Android technology to catch up
Yeah,
so that he could make AI with a real Android.
yeah,
Yeah.
That the idea of, because in the special features on the disc for Eyes Wide Shut, they talk about how, well, one, this film was extensively rehearsed. All of the performances that you're seeing were rehearsed down to every little detail, and that's before they're doing the zillion takes.
Yeah.
yeah,
They're doing rehearsals. First, they're doing rehearsals. Then they get to a certain point, and Kubrick starts taping the rehearsals, not filming them, just taping them, and then filming starts. And they were channeling their real marriage into their performances in those scenes together. They
yeah,
talk a lot about that. So I think that had to also just be something for him where he was like, this is only going to work if I get people who are actually married.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that Kubrick was really stoking the flames for this kind of trust to fall down between them. He didn't want Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman to discuss their characters with each other. He didn't want them to kind of be sharing notes outside of the filming.
Right.
And then when Nicole Kidman shot the dream sequence or the imaginary sequence, it was a closed set, and Tom Cruise wasn't allowed anywhere near it, and it went on for like 4 days. Just to really kind of mess with his, like, what is happening on that stage,
Yeah.
And again, people have seen it as Kubrick like toying with them, but it's all for the end goal of, pure cinema. He just wants it to be as real as possible. He wants these performances to be as believable as they possibly be. And if that means playing with a marriage, he's gonna play with that marriage.
Yeah.
And what's interesting there too is Tom Cruise talked about one of the difficult parts of making this film for him was the fact that he is in essentially the entire movie.
Yeah.
He's in almost every shot, or he's the focus of if he's not in the shot, it's where you're talking about incidental establishing shots. Basically, he's in 98% of the film, and I think that was daunting for him, that he'd been a star, but he'd never, this entire movie is riding on him from start to finish. So there's also that interesting thing of, what are they doing on the days where they need Nicole and not me? That's kind of like be, especially when you're on the call sheet every day except for like these couple of days.
Yeah, and it's a closed set as well, which obviously means nudity, sex scene, and they both signed open-ended contracts. So when they joined the production, neither of them could work on another film until this was completed, and it took 2.5 years to finish, because they did the initial shoot, and then Kubrick called everyone back to do reshoots 6 months after they'd finished. So
Wow.
I think it held the Guinness World Record for the longest film shoot ever.
Right, like the longest continuous film shoot.
Yeah. It probably still does that, right? I don't know. Yeah.
For a single film?
Well, just in terms of...
I was going to say, I think maybe that might be like the asterisk.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
But they shot all 3.
Well, Boyhood was over, 12 years.
Yeah.
But that's not continuous,
yeah,
is it?
Exactly, yeah. I did want to point out that the lighting in the scene you're talking about, where there's like the blue and the yellow separating the two rooms, they do that in The Shining, in some of the scenes with Dick Halloran, played by Scatman Crothers, when he's like waiting around, when he's like making the phone calls, he's like waiting around. You can see that they do the same kind of technique, which is cool.
Yeah, and the blue is also in Full Metal Jacket when Private Pile goes crazy at the end.
That's true.
It's all Dave's in that blue moonlight.
Mm-hmm. That evil blue. That psychotic blue.
Yeah.
Blue just means you're sad.
Yeah.
You're depressed.
Or, you suggested blue balls.
Yes, yeah.
I think that Bill's night would have been cut a lot shorter once he had some post-nut clarity.
Oh my god, I made a mistake.
Yeah. It was just a dream. She didn't do anything. What am I doing?
Meditate.
Yeah.
Wink, wink. Before he left the house to visit the dead guy, and he would have just come home after that, and
he should have just gone to the fucking cinema and watched a movie. God damn it!
He could have.
Where were you all night? Was watching a double feature.
There was I was looking up on YouTube some conspiracy theories, because that's always fun to do with Kubrick films, as we talk about like Room 237 and stuff like that. And there was one that was talking about the fact that at Ziegler's party, there's like drinks and like Christmas lights and dancing and bands and stuff like that, but there's no food anywhere. And that throughout the film, this is a constant theme where the quote unquote lower class that he comes in contact with have all been eating or are eating at a certain point, and the only thing that he orders throughout the film is black coffee. He never kind of, partakes. When he goes to Domino's, she's like, "Oh, sorry, I've just been cooking," and she moves the pan across. When he goes to find out where Nick went, and he goes to the little restaurant, everyone's eating around him. He just orders coffee, and it's kind of that, he's too kind of upper class to be seen eating in front of people. Like, he'll just order black coffee or water.
Well, and the funny thing about that is that there's still limits to how much, to how far up the echelon he can go. Because here's a guy who can offer up $200 more, than the asking price of a rented tux, who is willing to pay a prostitute $150 just for the trouble of bothering her and going home without,
bothering her.
Exchange of services. Rips a $100 bill in half for a taxi driver.
Yeah.
Says he'll give him the other half later. But there's still like a level that he's not welcome in. It's not to say that he's not rich, but his wealth is also, he kind of flaunts it to working class people, a sex worker, taxi driver, a shop owner, and I don't know, well, would a shop owner be working class? He's part of the petite bourgeoisie, I guess. I don't know. But he's still not welcome.
Yeah.
At this part.
And it's kind of thrown in his face as well. When he gets found out, he's like, "Well, how did you know?" "Oh, you used the password twice, and you left your taxi cab waiting at the front gates." Right. And it's very kind of like,
and your receipt was in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, you moron! Like, these are things that we would not dream of doing.
Yeah.
You're so below us. And he's like, "Oh."
I just want to say I love this movie, but the orgy scene to me is kind of disappointing. It doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go weird enough for me.
Yeah.
It's way too like, and I'm sure this is just Kubrick's, what Kubrick wanted it to be. That's fine. I'm not implying I would have done it better than Kubrick, but I think it would have been like creepier if if everybody was naked and like everybody had like an old wrinkly body,
Yeah.
not the statuesque, these tall women, tall thin women walking around. Like, I think that something like, everyone's naked and everyone's old and wrinkly because they're rich and they screw each other, and that's what it's ritualistic and whatever. It just felt to me like it wasn't creepy or weird or strange enough.
Yeah.
It wasn't otherworldly enough to me. It's one of those eras where I'm like, was he holding back?
I think
the one part of the film that got censored on its original release.
Well, yeah, I think that we've talked. There's been a few times where he's had to battle the censors to get it from an X rating down to an NC-17, because it was still, an X rating was the kiss of death. It was still like, okay, this is pretty much going to be labeled around the world as a porno.
Well, in the 70s, a film could release with an X rating, and people understood. Midnight Cowboy had an X rating when it won the Best Picture Oscar. Midnight Cowboy and A Clockwork Orange were both box office successes with X ratings. The X rating became something to avoid when the MPA didn't copyright it, so that allowed adult film studios and filmmakers to use it for themselves, and that's why they invented Triple X. They were like, you think this is X ratings for adults? Well, this is 3Xs, right? And so it got out of control for the MPAA. They didn't want to use it because of that. The funky thing about this movie to me is that this movie was never rated NC-17. It was edited by Warner Brothers before they submitted it for rating because they were afraid it would get an NC-17. and Kubrick was dead at this point, so he had no actual say in this. But it's very, I don't know, it's just interesting that
Yeah.
like we kind of as a society like kind of went backwards because an X-rated film in the 70s could make money because it was just understood like this is a movie for mom and dad, not for kids. Whatever, that's
Yeah.
fine. Mom and dad would go to the theater and go see a movie without little Billy. But by the 90s, you've already started that kind of like four quadrant thing where movies have to appeal to the widest audience possible. It's kind of like now where it almost seems like everything is PG-13, you know. But that was beginning back then where it was just like we don't even want it to be NC-17, even though what would it really wouldn't be bad if it was rated NC-17, and we'll never know if it would have been because they didn't submit it for rating for that. But then like NC-17 is also treated by the film studios. Well, I don't even think it's the film studios. It's the theater companies, because you had regional distribution in the 70s. In the 90s, you just have it's released in the entire country all on the same day. So the big theater chains are in control. They won't carry NC-17 movies. NC-17 movies can't be advertised in newspapers because those newspapers just, and all of it is to just avoid controversy. It's like we don't want to risk someone protesting us carrying a film, so we're just going to blanket say we don't carry NC-17 movies. And therefore, studios don't want their movies rated NC-17 because they can't release them NC-17. Also, the biggest NC-17 movie released before this was Showgirls, which was a huge flop. So there may have also just been that bitter taste in the mouths of studio heads where it's like, we don't want this to be another Showgirls if it gets rated NC-17.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where we run into the Kubrick dying just before it was released. His daughter said that there was a chance he probably would have still been tinkering with it for a year.
Oh,
After this to get it ready for how he wanted it to be seen. So there's a chance that even though, I know when you look about it, it says that he died a few days after handing in his final cut. I don't think it's his final cut. I think there's still things in there that he was probably wanting to tinker with and change. So I don't think that, we quite got the finished film.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what kind of major changes you could make. I mean, because even if you look at like the changes he made to 2001 and The Shining, I think were just kind of like shortening sequences. But
He pretty much changed the full ending of The Shining though, at the last minute.
oh, did he?
Yeah, there was a whole scene where Wendy and oh my gosh, I forgot his name. The manager of the hotel met in hospital, like that came right at the end of the film.
When it was originally released, that was the ending.
Well, just before he cut it, like 2 days before the premiere.
Well, if he had lived, I'm sure he would have changed it. But it seems like on the day he died, it probably was the final cut.
Yeah. And it may have been subtle things, we'll do take 61 of this instead of take 35. Right. So
I do feel like, even with all the, even though this film could have gone further with the orgy scene, more graphic, more edgy.
It's not about being graphic to me. It's more of just like, I don't know. There's something
weirder.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
I wanted it to be frightening, I guess.
Even though there's that, I think it is amazing when you compare this film to Lolita, which is I guess the only other film in his filmography that the entire subject matter revolves around sex. Like most of his other films are about violence or sex and violence. That was a film, like just looking at film history and looking at like what he had to do to get around, the MPAA or, the powers that be to be able to make a film about sex and have audiences come see it. The evolution of that to now, the whole movie is just tits and ass is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But in the book that I read about Stanley Kubrick by David Mickix, said it right finally. He said that one reviewer of the film said, "Whose idea of an orgy is this? The Catholic Church's?"
I mean,
Yeah.
I do like the idea of them having like a strange religious ritual,
Yeah.
um, because that is like present in. Well, that's the other thing is like as far as conspiracy theories go, some people think Stanley Kubrick was killed because he was actually exposing the real lives of certain elite people. But when you do look into those conspiracies about the elite, those sort of elite things, Bohemian Grove is the one that comes to mind. Um, that's like what it's always portrayed as, having these like weird religious. There's like a ceremony involved.
Yeah.
It's not just everybody take your pants off and go crazy, you know. Um,
And this is why I think that, it just plays more into this dreamlike for Bill. It's just that for little Bill, this is probably the most deprived his little mind gets. It's like, okay, there's a man being used as a table and someone's having sex on top of him. That's as far as it goes, you know. I mean, that's how I like to think about it.
Do you guys know who played the Red Cloak? The guy who was
Leon Vitali,
Yeah.
Lord Bullington.
Yeah, that's him.
And
He
did
actually
you?
played a lot of characters in that scene.
Do what?
He's like the guy. He's like the guy who takes his coat. He's the when Bill first walks in and he looks up and there's like two people on the second. There's like a man and a woman on the balcony that look down at him. Leon Vitali is also the guy in that mask. He's like
Yeah.
he's just all. It's just like we need a shot of a guy in this because he was there. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
he was like this. The gopher of standing around in that film in that sequence in masks.
And there's a very famous person that lent their voice to one of the women, well, the woman at the party that gets paired with Bill, and it's a link to Todd Field as well.
Oh, who is she?
Kate Blanchett. It's her voice as
What?
the woman, that tells Bill to get out. It's not her playing the part,
Right.
It's her voice though.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
As far as final cuts go, and actually this is kind of like everything Kubrick, you know, it's fun to speculate. I've kind of come to where I'll ask what does his family say, and I'll typically just kind of trust their answer because he was very 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 close knit with his wife and his brother-in-law. His brother-in-law Jan Harlan was a producer. This is his wife's brother was a producer on all his films. I want to say starting with Barry Lyndon, but he may have also been there as far back as A Clockwork Orange. And like he also produced, I believe he produced AI. He was very involved in getting AI made with Spielberg. And I have a tendency to lean towards what they say. Like there's a whole section on Wikipedia about different people saying Kubrick called me up and said, "Man, this movie sucks." And then, other people saying like, "Yeah, no, that didn't happen," and all this sort of back and forth. And the family says, Jan Harlan has said that Stanley was very satisfied with the film that he delivered to the executives. It's almost like the death was. I know we kind of said like, oh, was he sort of trying to get this stuff out, before he died, and it does almost feel like he died. Like it was kind of like, oh, my work is done, and then he died. Is that almost kind of sense with the film, the way it's like he delivered the print and then 3 days later he's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from the stuff I've read that he died of exhaustion.
That's also a possibility.
Yeah.
He was a sedentary man who smoked. Probably didn't eat very healthy. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
Who worked all the time?
Well, his father was a doctor, and he supposedly would not go to the doctor.
Mm.
He would just prescribe himself stuff, self-medicate. and that kind of thing.
If we're talking about the men versus women, a lot of men do not go to the doctor.
No.
Yeah. I would go more if I had money and insurance. But
Right. That's not the reason though. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's not like the driving force why men don't go to the doctor. Could we talk a little bit about Jewish stuff? Because I don't know if you guys have really touched on this, because I'm sort of interested in this because I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
Kubrick's also Jewish, but you would never guess that watching. There's no sense of Jewish identity or Jewish culture in any of his films.
just The Shining, it's all about it.
His films have an almost like, because the other thing is like his films don't have any real sense of like any kind of identity like beyond being human. Like there's no, to me there's not really ever like a national identity to any of his films. Like his films don't feel like American films, but they also don't feel like British films. The one film that feels like a British film is A Clockwork Orange to me. That's like the one that feels, because it's like all English actors, obviously set in England and filmed in England, based on an English book, and also kind of, it's a little late for this, but it feels like it's part of like that like British angry young man, like British new wave, like 60s
Storm and stuff like that.
Yeah, like the young guy who's kind of like the antisocial person against the system, and the casting of Malcolm McDowell adds to that because he plays that. It's that's an iconic performance, and directed by Lindsay Anderson, who's deeply associated with that. That film feels like it is like a late bloomer to an actual sort of like British film movement, but none of his other films feel distinctly British or English or American, and certainly not Jewish. This movie in particular is based on a novel that's very Jewish because the novel, the characters are explicitly Jewish. The incidents where Bill is harassed by the college guys, and they basically just emasculate him. But in the book, that is a specifically an anti-Semitic like harassment that the character receives. And he was, according to his co-writer on the script, who is also a dubious source of information, I guess, according to the family, he did say that Kubrick wanted to remove all traces of Judaism from the book. To the point that he said he wanted the character to be like a Harrison Ford type goy, and then named the character Hartford after Harrison Ford. The reason this is interesting with Eyes Wide Shut to me is, one, his earliest version of this movie was a sex comedy starring either Woody Allen or Steve Martin. Now, Steve Martin is not Jewish, but I would not blame you if you thought he was, because he's like an honorary member of the tribe. He passes for Jewish. And Woody Allen, is his entire persona is this very specific negative stereotype of Jewish masculinity. So Kubrick's earliest version of this movie would probably never have been able to remove itself from a Jewish reading. But then he goes and makes a completely non-Jewish film. And it's interesting to me too that he was working on a script for a Holocaust film before he made this. That is about pretending you're not Jewish to survive the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Where am I going? I'm not going anywhere. I don't know where this all leads. I just think these are like, it's a strange thing about him. And even the fact that when he was actually going to tackle a very, very Jewish story, that it would be a story about characters, because the premise is two characters who get forged documents that say they're I think like Polish Catholics instead of Jews. So they're able to travel out and get out. The idea that, removing Jewish identity, I'm just so curious to know where that comes from. Why it is. It's such a strange thing to me.
I think that this does play into the film a little bit, Zach. I think you've hit on something because it's set around Christmas, which is a Christian holiday. In the only place where it doesn't feel like Christmas is in the apartment, the Hartfield's apartment. There doesn't seem to be that much. And in the opening scene, there is a menorah style candle on top of his
I
dresser.
saw that, and I was trying to figure out what it was, but I didn't linger on it too long.
And it could just be like a kind of semi nod to the book,
Right.
just like we know where we're going. But I mean, it could also be again about these people putting on a face for the outside. They're toy shopping together for Christmas, but they don't seem to be too into Christmas as a whole.
No.
It's like outside in front of people, there are different people than they are behind closed doors. And I think there's only like one instance where this theory kind of like comes together. But I mean, it's a theme he loves. And like you said, he's kind of like, he's been very aware of, Jewishness, I guess, throughout, in recent kind of developments of projects. So I don't think it's against the odds that he would insert some ideas into this.
Yeah.
Ziegler sounds Jewish to me.
Yeah.
He's not a nice character.
No.
What are you doing, Stanley? You're disappointing your mother. I'm very fascinated with like just the outside elements of this movie and where it sits. When it came out, the marketing blitz was Cruise, Kidman, Nicole. Cruise, Kidman, Kubrick, right? That's what it says on the poster. Yeah. Open number one, its opening weekend. It was also the same weekend that JFK Jr. died, so it was a very dark weekend in America. And huge drop off to week two, like more than 50%, and then just sort of like fizzled out. Very interesting to me that this movie was never up for awards when the award season came up. And I'm not saying that in the sense that like, well, this was the best picture of 1999. It's interesting to me that there was not a rallying around Kubrick, a posthumous rallying around the last Kubrick film.
Yeah.
Like by awards bodies. That seems like something that would have happened. Even if it was just like the lone best director nomination, that almost seems like, that happens, once every 100 years. It's like, it is kind of strange that didn't happen, but that might play into how divisive the film was, because so many people were just, I think, flabbergasted by it. Like, they didn't know what to think of it. They didn't like it. And yet, the following year, I think, if you try and find best films of the 90s, like lists that were made in the year 2000, like when we were like, it's probably on a few of those.
Yeah.
There were people who immediately recognized, I think, Scorsese.
Yeah.
I'll always trust Scorsese. If he singles out, if you find an interview and he singles out a title, I'm like, it's probably worth looking at. It's probably worth its salt. And it's like, some people immediately were like, he died, he made a masterpiece and then he died. And some people were like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
So that reaction probably also just kind of plays into that, because it maybe is a film that it took a lot of time for people to appreciate. Because
I think
now it is regarded as one of the best of the decade.
Yeah.
I still do think that discourse is going on, though. I still think that people are still like, what the hell is this? And other people are like, this is his last masterpiece. This is the film that he kind of left us with that's as good as the rest. And I don't know if that is as discussed with his other films. I think his other films are all, more unanimously agreed that it's great, Whereas this is still very kind of up and down, depending who you talk to.
Yeah.
And he did turn to someone on the set and wink at them and say, let's see what they make of this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, we'll never know. We'll never have that
Fine.
reaction of him.
I'm better off not knowing.
Yeah, I think so.
I
Yeah.
think we're better off just watching the films and finding our own meaning in them.
Yeah.
The great Todd Field, wonderful performance as Nick Nightingale.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I love when he says, "I just play the piano," and he twizzles. What's the word I'm looking for? He twiddles his fingers.
Yeah.
Fingers. Mentored by Kubrick and went on to become a great director himself.
Yeah. Mhm.
Who also takes a lot of time between projects. That was something that I heard that they talked about on one of the documentaries too. That was Kubrick like always felt like crap when people would bring up how long it took between. Like he felt like a failure that he
Yeah.
wasn't making more movies. And it is interesting that in the lead up to this, he was writing 2 other films. He was writing
Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
and Aryan Papers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he gave up on Aryan Papers 1 because it was so close to home and he felt like it was impossible to actually film because of how, like, if he was going to actually show what was in the script, it was going to be
Mhm.
way more grotesque than any of the other films he had made.
Yes.
And then at the same time, like, Spielberg had announced that he was doing Schindler's List, and I think he didn't want another pass, or he didn't want
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
Full Metal
Like
Jacket
Platoon,
and
yeah.
Platoon situation. So he's like, let's move on. Let's do something else.
Yeah.
And it seemed like he was relieved, and his wife was relieved because he was already putting so much into it that it was just like
Yeah.
obvious that it was going to kill him, I guess. But then his next movie did anyway.
Yeah. And films are so consumable. I mean, we don't sit there like if a novelist takes 10 years to write a book,
Mhm.
it's not like this big like, oh, what a
Yeah.
come on, but with films, because we can sit and watch it in one sitting, we get the home video release, we seem to kind of own it from the get-go. It is like, okay, what are you doing next? I've consumed it. I need the next thing.
Yes.
And Kubrick is very, he read a lot, he did a lot of research, as we know, like he wanted to get it right. And you look at his filmography and he got it right, it paid off. So
Yeah.
There is a certain point where one of the reasons he stopped with AI and pursued this was kind of the realization that AI wasn't right for him to direct.
Yeah.
So I was excited about working with Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, and always leave them wanting more, right? I
Yeah.
mean, how many directors are you just like, oh, okay, enough?
Enough. Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting to that point in Hollywood. Every film is a
Yeah.
reboot, remake, whatever, and it's like, okay, whatever. Kubrick was doing his own thing, and yeah, paid off. Okay, so let's guess what we rated it on Letterboxd, and for listeners, this is kind of what we do at the end of every show. Me and Brandon guess what the other person rated on Letterboxd. Zach, I know that you don't rate on Letterboxd. You just kind of log stuff,
Yeah.
So do you want to take a guess as to what Brandon and I rated this first?
Lewis, I think you gave it a 4. And Brandon, I think you gave it a 4.5.
All right. Lewis, I think you gave it 4.5.
Okay. Brandon, I think I gave it 4.5 as well.
All right.
I gave it 5.
Damn.
What?
Yes. The last time I watched it, I gave it 3.5.
Mhm.
Which made me kind of scowl at my phone as if, 5 years ago, Lewis, you were an imbecile. What were you doing? Yeah, it's mesmerizing. It makes you think, there's so many things in there that's just beautiful. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's 5 stars.
You are very selective about doling out. You don't dole out 5s.
I don't. No.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
I also gave it a 5.
Damn.
Here we go.
Yeah, I can't, like, how could you not? It's like, what what takes off the half star or the star? It's like this
Yeah.
movie is perfect. It's amazing. It's
That's why I
incredible.
don't rate it at all.
Yeah.
It's just a heart for me. I just loved it.
Yeah.
I could tell as soon as you said you'd watched it 3 times, I was like, someone enjoyed it.
Within the last week or couple
It's
weeks.
like
Couple
two,
weeks.
2.5 weeks, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where we're going to put it in the ranking.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily think that it's better than The Shining, even though I gave it
Yeah.
half a star. I gave
Yeah.
The Shining 4.5 stars. That's what I'll say first. What are you thinking?
I mean, when I was looking at it, my personal would have been in between Shining and Strangelove.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Strangelove is better.
Yeah.
I think I just love Strangelove more.
Yeah.
Strangelove is something that I can put on anytime. Doesn't matter where I'm at, and anybody can watch it. I can't put this on wherever I'm at, and anybody can't watch it.
Like me and the in-laws watching Full Metal Jacket.
Many years
Yeah.
ago, I went to a screening of Full Metal Jacket, and afterwards there was a Q&A with Vincent D'Onofrio and Jan Harlan, and I think it was like the last question of the night. The last person asked them, "What's your favorite? What's each of you, the moderator, Vincent D'Onofrio and Jan Harlan? What's your favorite Kubrick movie, and what's your favorite Star Wars movie?" That was like the last question of the night. All three of them said Strangelove is their favorite Kubrick movie, and they all said the first Star Wars is their favorite Star Wars. But the ubiquitousness of Strangelove is like that is a movie that it's like the only Kubrick movie that strangers have ever like talked about with me.
Yeah.
Especially old men. Men my dad's age love that movie.
Yeah. I would put it between Strangelove and A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah, I think it's definitely in the top 5. It's if it's 4 or 5.
Yeah. I don't know. What are we gonna do? Rock, paper, scissors?
I mean, as long as it's in the top 5.
What did you
I'm happy
rate
with it
Doctor
being 5.
Strangelove?
Oh, let me go back and have a look. I think was it 4.5?
Because I rated The Shining 4.5.
Yeah, I think. Let me pull it up.
Should we just put it above The Shining?
I gave it 4.5. That's Strangelove.
Just stick it at number 1.
I mean, this will all be arbitrary next week when we never talk about this list again.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with it being number 5.
Okay. I'm happy if you're happy.
I'm happy. Let's put it right there. And do you want to do the honors of the final official Film Church Radio Kubrick ranking?
Sure. From bottom to top.
Let's do it.
All right, folks. Coming in at number 13. Fear and Desire, 1953. I'm going to take so long. I'm just making this so long as possible. Coming in at number 12, we've got Spartacus from 1960. Coming in at number 11, we've got Lolita, 1962. Number 10, Killer's Kiss, 1955. Number 9, The Killing, 1956. Number 8, Barry Lyndon, 1975. Number 7, Full Metal Jacket, 1987. Number 6, A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Number 5, Eyes Wide Shut, 1999. Number 4, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, 1964. Number 3, The Shining, 1980. Number 2, Paths of Glory, 1957. And coming in at number 1 is 2001: A Space Odyssey from 1968.
I did not expect it to look like this when we started. That's all I'm going to say.
I can't believe Killer's Kiss is above Lolita.
we both had a blast with Killer's Kiss.
You guys liked Killer's Kiss. I don't care for it.
Yeah, I mean, every week as Lolita gets lower and lower, I'm like,
Yeah. Didn't even make the top 10. Nearly made 13.
Oh,
But
no, it
like
didn't.
honestly, all these movies are amazing. It's like what it like.
Yeah. It's splitting hairs.
They're all
really.
they're all
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah, apart from Spartacus and Fear and Desire. They all bottom.
Spartacus.
So we haven't done this for a while though, Brandon. Are you going to surprise us with what we're watching next week?
Yes, I
Oh
am.
my god.
I bet you can't wait.
I can't
I bet
wait.
the listeners
Yeah.
can't wait. It's been the whole year of just Kubrick so far.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't let it end.
spoilers. It's not ending, folks. We're gonna go one more for you. Stanley Kubrick, Part 14, AI, Artificial Intelligence. We're doing that next week.
The afterword.
The coda.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
We might
Yeah,
have a
it's gonna
guest
be
yet to be determined, but if we do, we'll play that clip now. If not,
Yeah, we'll be right back with no interruption.
yeah.
I'm excited to hear you guys discuss this because I know I asked you, Lewis, about if you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in a long time.
I went to see it in the cinema when it was first released with my mum, and I haven't seen it since.
Okay,
Oh
and
wow,
Brandon,
I have never watched it.
you've never seen it. Okay.
It's going to be good.
Never in my life.
I can't wait.
It is Spielberg's return to directing too, because he hadn't made a film since Saving Private Ryan. So there was that long 3-year gap between movies for him.
Yeah.
It's going to be good. I'm excited. And this is our first Spielberg on the pod, I think.
Really? Interesting.
Probably.
Yeah.
Official.
Exciting times. Yeah. Zach, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, always so great to have you on. Love your analysis of these films. It's always great. But that brings us to the end of the show and the end of the Kubrick retrospective, kind of. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Film Church Radio, and you can follow us individually on Letterboxd. Brandon is at Selmanscope, and I am at Walker Lewis 3007. You can keep up with what we've been watching. We also have all our back episodes streaming on all good podcast platforms, and you can leave us a rating and review so we know if you like the film. If you didn't know what you would pick for us to watch in the future. Thank you so much for being here. We love that people are listening, and we hope to see you next Sunday for more Film Church. All that we've got left to say is, there's something very important that we need to do as soon as possible. Fuck. Say your Film Church prayers. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Mazel tov.